Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, dear viewers, to another episode of Mic'd Up. And I'm your host, Omar. We appreciate you joining us for this episode. It was something that a lot of people wanted us to speak about and kind of put some stuff into perspective. And inshallah, we're going to do that before we jump in to the actual podcast and I introduce my guests that are with me today. Just a couple housekeeping. So please make sure we want to get the viewership up in YouTube. So please make sure that you like and subscribe and also share the link to your friends and families, obviously for the viewing purposes. So the message gets out to not just the people who continue to follow us, as we do appreciate the love and support as always, but others as well. And then that way we can stay connected with them as well. So you Mic'd Up 416 on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, so go out and follow us on there as well. And we're live here in Haramain Studios for Season 3. So we appreciate Haramain TV Studios for allowing us to use the studio for Season 3. So shout out to everybody behind the scenes on Haramain TV, Brother Asif. And if you're not connected with Haramain TV on Facebook, go out and follow, as well as on your IPTV boxes for true Islamic content and everyday Islamic essentials on the channel. So please make sure you're connected on your IPTV boxes, Haramain TV. Inshallah, they're doing some great work and some great episodes and videos and speeches and so on and so forth. So make sure you're connected with them. Jazakallah, this is episode number 8. I think this is something that everybody can relate to, and some people tend to forget about this topic, but it is drawing near, and we're going to talk about how close we actually are and how scary it actually is. So this is episode number 8, the end of times. And over to my right, no stranger to the podcast, no stranger to the show, Hafiz Yahya is joined me, as well as his brother Hafiz Bilal. So both Hafiz, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
It's always a pleasure to have Hafiz Yahya, because even just before the podcast we were laughing about a comment that he made on another show, but it's good one-liners and punchlines that he always puts his insight in, and obviously the podcast that he's been on, fantastic. And same with Hafiz Bilal, a more intellectual, not to say Hafiz Yahya is not intellectual, but a more intellectual sound individual on our podcast. So I appreciate you guys coming out. I think this is going to be a good show. We're going to get right into it. End of times. When I put out the message on the Instagram and asked what people want to talk about, this one was heavily favored to be a show and for us to speak on it. The end of times is very scary, something that sits on the back burner. We don't really think about it. I guess I want to start there. So Hafiz Sab, or anyone, well, Hafiz Sab, who the concept of the end of times is not something that people talk about now. They think we're going to live forever, and we don't think about our akhirah. I go, let's start there first before anything else, because I think that's a sign in itself that we're not afraid of our death. We don't think that we're going to die. We're going to live here forever. Let's start there. Your take on that and why Muslims nowadays believe death is something that sits in the back burner.
I'm going to let Hafiz Bilal start this time.
That's okay. Hafiz Ab.
When we talk about this, or when we think about this topic, us having experienced, at least, getting knowledge and, having the right tarbiyah and the right upbringing, we at least have the thought and the notion that, hey, we're not here for a long time. Right? Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Right? Every soul must taste death.
Yes.
But when you look in the broader range, for those who haven't had that sort of a background or missed that sort of experience, you're seeing that, hey, they're living this life as if they're guaranteed tomorrow.
Right.
I'm going to wake up tomorrow, I'm going to do this. And you sort of get that idea and that sort of concept building, right? And I think the reason why there's such a big disconnect, at least one of the reasons I think why, is one thing you have to remember is that everything in Islam has a purpose, right? Some actions, for those that know, fardul ayn wa fardul kifaya, right? There are those actions which are obligatory upon everyone.
Absolutely.
And there are also the communal obligations.
Absolutely.
One important communal obligation that we are supposed to do is attending the janazah.
Correct.
Right? And that's not just for the person that's deceased. It's for yourself as well.
Absolutely.
Right? It's a reminder for yourself that, hey, tomorrow is never guaranteed.
Right.
Your eyes could close at any moment. Your breath could stop at any moment. Up to Allah.
Right.
Right.
So, Hafiz, like in the concept of death is something that is only brought up in a certain time. Like somebody passes away, you remember death. So a close one passes away, a friend, a family member, so on and so forth, and we remember death at that given time. But why is it something that is not, I guess, amongst the young generation, the younger generation, so to speak? Why is it something that is just, yeah, I'll think about it when it actually happens to me in that sense, meaning affected by me and my family or something like that?
I think the biggest issue is that the way we commemorate death, in other words, you could even say celebrate it.
Yeah,
it's become a function. It's just become something that we celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
It does not hold any true, values besides, okay, this is kind of the final rites for someone that has been deceased,
right.
And that's it. Everyone deep down, if you go to a funeral, knows that one day, that's the one guarantee we came into life with. We are going to go.
Right.
The problem is now when you start taking something that is an ibadah and you turn it into a commemoration, a function, right? That's all it's going to become. It's in that moment, and that's all it is. Whereas if you look at the time of the companions, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in, that they used to constantly remember death. They used to shiver out of fear, even though they were guaranteed Jannah. So imagine this, you're guaranteed, Allah gave you a guarantee that you're going to Jannah, but they would still tremble with fear, right? That was their taqwa in Allah. So these are the people that you need to look back at and say, hey, they treated this as an ibadah.
Right.
They didn't treat it just as a commemoration, right? The other thing is, when people die, we're all sad, right? Well, why would you need to be sad? Of course, as a human being, you have that emotional connection to someone, but if you know that they're going to a better place, you shouldn't be sad. It's that remorse and that regret, and the things, the sins you might have committed together, right? And those times, right?
Very good
But
point.
this is the human reality, and like I said, you have to step out of the fact that it's just a commemoration. If you treat it like it's worship and you're constantly remembering it, you won't have the same outlook. Because here's the thing: if you could go to sleep tonight, and this is your last night on earth,
Right.
Last night in this world, are you going to say, "Hey, I can stand in front of my Rabb, and He will be pleased"? None of us can say that.
No.
So if you cannot, take self-account and say that, hey, my Lord, if I stand in front of my Lord tonight, I will not be able to, then you need to take another approach as to how you define your death and how you look at maut, right? There's a reason why Allah said, kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, right? Everyone shall taste it, right? But the focus is not just the commemoration or the ceremonial part of it.
Right.
It's to remember. Because Allah could have just said, hey, the household, go and bury him, that's it. It didn't have to be a fard kifaya upon the community.
Very good point.
Right? It's for other people as well to remember that, hey, this is our reality. You came here, you made money, you did this, you did that, that's great. But at the end of the day, you're going to go 6 feet under.
Yeah.
And when you have those two angels asking you questions, will you be able to answer? Right? So you need to change your perspective on how you look at death.
The one thing that just came to mind as you were talking about death, me and Hafiz Bilal did a course at the center on Janazah, 4 weeks course.
I was there.
And and how real, when we put, well, it wasn't a real body, but when we put the mannequin there and people actually saw, and Hafiz, if you remember, people were just shocked, like this is how real it gets. And when we were putting the kafan and showing the ghusl and all of that, like this is the realest point that people don't think about. And when you were mentioning, the companions, Alim Ridwan, I remember when we went to Jannatul Baqi, and like you said, they were the ones who were guaranteed paradise. But the Prophet ﷺ used to go and tell people, go and visit graves, so you remember your death, and that's something that is far, far back in the people's minds. Because what is more important is obviously the world. And, their jobs, like you said, and the money that they got to make and the houses that they got to buy and so on and so forth. Which leads us, I guess, a great segue into the actual topic is the end of times. Now, the Prophet ﷺ extensively spoke about major signs, minor signs, and so on and so forth. And I want to touch on some of them for the viewers, and especially people who don't know about signs that either already happened or are happening. Right? So I guess let's start there. What's one of them that you think that anyone can jump in, is something that stands out and says, well, this one's definitely happened or is happening or has happened already. And then I want to kind of put that together at the end and say, look, guys, we said a bunch of these signs, minor or major, and look. And then I want to leave with the stuff that we're leaving at the end with. And I think I want to finish off with that to even put it all into perspective, like so eloquently. So
I'll start off with one that connects to me right away. We're speaking about end of time or the end of times, right?
Yeah.
Keyword their time, right? Sayyidina Anas bin Malik radiyallahu anhu, he narrates this hadith from Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "La taqumu as-sa'atu hatta yataqarabu az-zaman." That the hour will not come until time is constrained.
Yep.
How is it constrained? فَتَكُونُ السَّنَةُ كَالشَّهْرِ وَالشَّهْرُ كَالْجُمُعَةِ.
Allahu.
That the year will feel like a month and the month will feel like a week.
Right.
وَتَكُونُ الْجُمُعَةُ كَالْيَوْمِ. And a week will feel like a day.
Yeah.
وَيَكُونُ الْيَوْمُ كَالسَّاعَةِ. And then the day will feel like an hour. And وَالسَّاعَةُ كَالضَّرْمَةُ بِالنَّارِ. And that the hour is like the flare of the fire. Right? And we experience that, right? You're sitting here today, you're thinking about, hey, we're already in 2024.
Yeah.
Almost a month, over a month has almost passed by.
Right.
Right? Like everything is just flying through,
absolutely.
right? You don't remember what went to, like you don't feel the time passing, but the next day you wake up, the day was short.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what I did. I didn't have time to do this, that, and that. And you're feeling that effect of that time constraint or that constricting time.
I don't have
upon you.
time.
Yeah.
I don't have time. One of the things, as you mentioned, Imam Hajar, who does naql of that in Fathul Bari, he said that the time restraint that you mentioned, that the day will feel like just minutes went by. The misal that he used was the time, the day will feel as if the time difference between Asr and Maghrib. And that's how it feels like. Like you could be busy working or doing anything and you're just like, where did the time go? To your point.
Yeah.
But for me, I think that one, the value of time, and we talk about the students in madrasa and we tell them, there's ones who are studying Fardul Ulum and all of that. And we tell them about that value of time. And the one that stands out to me the most, Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he slept 2 hours in 20 years. 20 years. And though he didn't live a long life, but that little jalak that you get, when you're about to doze off, he counted that as sleep. And when he calculated it, and he said that I calculated my eyes closing, equivalent to 2 hours in 20 years. And he says, I continued to study, and I valued time so much. And the Prophet ﷺ mentions that. And he says, there's going to be no barakah in time. Allah will lift barakah from time. And to your point, that's where the restraints come in. Hafiz.
There's a lot of signs that have already happened. There's a lot that are still to come.
Right.
The major ones still to come are like the Dajjal, the beast of the earth, Ya'juj and Ma'juj.
Yeah.
Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam comes back, Imam Mahdi, the appearance of Imam Mahdi, so
Right.
on and so forth.
Right.
But some of the ones that have already passed, people that are disrespectful to their parents, right? Zina, alcohol, drug abuse, right? There's one I was just reading right now that really crossed my mind, and I think this is a good interpretation of it, that the number of men will decrease, meaning the ratio of men to women, right? I don't know if that means physically there'll be less men born,
Right.
but in today's society, you can see there's a lot of conversion happening,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
So 1400 years ago, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam already hinted to this,
Right.
right? He didn't have to tell you exactly what it is going to be, right? Because again, 1400 years ago, there's a time difference, right? But the moral or the message that you can take from the interpretation that you can take from the sign, you can see it happening before your eyes.
Right.
And people will compete, to construct tall buildings. There's also one narration that I read that towards the ends of times, a man will basically be able to know what goes on in his household and others from his thigh. And the image, if you look into this a little bit deeper, where do you keep your phone? Your cell phone. Your cell phone is in your pocket. You pull it out of your pocket, it vibrates, or you get a notification, and then you're looking. You can see what's happening across the world. Right. So some of these signs have already, a lot of these signs have already happened, and there's still some yet to happen. But my message to people is, don't wait for those signs to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Because you should be scared if you're living in that time when those final signs happen. You should be very, very scared.
Right.
Because the religion will be very, very fragile in the hearts of people.
And the concept of the Prophet ﷺ mentioning some of these hadith, he related it to his ummah. And that's where I think, You know, people, because if you think about it, for example, wine will be widespread, public drinking, and this and that. We know, and there's countries in the world that you can publicly drink, and so on and so forth. But wine will be normal. But it was normal in the time of the Prophet ﷺ too. So when the hukam came down to that it would be haram in Islam, the companions left it. But they didn't stop the kuffar of Makkah, for example, so on and so forth. Other areas when they migrated to Abyssinia, so on and so forth. So wine was still there. But why did he say wine will be widespread? It's still going to happen. It's amongst the nation now, right? And that's one of the things you see. Like you see Muslims, we see them all the time, right? And we see people who are going to clubs and stuff, and they're getting drunk, and they're intoxicated, and so on and so forth, and they can't let it go. We know people that come to the center, and you can smell alcohol on their breath. You know, Allah, you know, give them hidayah and save them from that drug. But the concept is, these narrations for the viewers, for them to understand, is when the Prophet ﷺ prophesied about the end of times, major and minor signs, it was to safeguard the ummah, and that the ummah will be doing some of these things. The construction of tall buildings, it's Muslims who are doing it. You go to where we just came from, and the building, we went to Ghar Thor, we went on top, Hafiz Luqman behind the scenes, led us in Salatul Fajr, and what did we see in the background? The clock tower, right? Which is probably the tallest building in that area anyways.
And the same, sorry to cut you off, same idea applies to all of them, right? So when Hafiz was mentioning, and you're mentioning these minor signs, right? Immorality becoming prevalent, or that which is haram becoming prevalent, right? Mm-hmm. We had adultery before. People have done adultery since time, right? It's not nothing new. Mm-hmm. But it's like you said, it's when the ummah starts to practice and starts to get involved in these actions, right? That's when it's considered a sign of the end, right?
One of the things I want to get your guys' take on it is fitna will arise a lot more. And fitna will prevail. And I think that's the wordings in Bukhari Sharif, that it will prevail. What's your take on that? Like, why would that be a fitna will prevail? What is your take on it? I'll fill in my take after you guys speak. But the Prophet ﷺ said, fitna will prevail. Meaning, will it have an effect on people and then they will fall into the fitna? Your kind of take on that about this.
Of course it will, because he also gave one of the other signs, ﷺ, that knowledge will decrease and there'll be more ignorance. Right. Knowledge is power. Right. A lot of people don't have that knowledge. Right. We talked about just right now the people that, you know, are falling trapped to, you know, the alcohol or the drugs or whatever. Most of them don't even know. It's sad to say that some of the stuff that they're doing is haram, or that it invalidates such and such. They don't know the consequences of their own actions. Right. So if you don't know, and you're just, like I said, if you're just a Muslim by name, or you're born into it, but you didn't actually, you know, accept it, you didn't actually take your own shahada, you didn't learn the basic requirements, you're going to fall trapped to this. And that's what's happened here, right? Our parents or grandparents or generations before us came to these countries, which was great. But obviously they could not, all of them, teach us the deen. And we didn't have the facilities in place. So 1 to 2 generations at least we lost. And because we lost them, their characteristics, their behaviors, those things changed. And you can see that translate now to these generations, of course, right? Where we see only a handful of people that have continued to teach the deen and stuff like that. It's been passed on, you know, and those, you know, Allah give hidayah to, they come and they learn. But majority of them, they don't really care, right? They treat religion like it's a hobby. It's a chore, right? They don't treat it like it's something they want to do. Right. Now, of course, if you're new to the religion, it's always going to be like, that's like starting a new workout, right? You're going to hate it the first few days, first few weeks. Of course. But then once you get into the routine of it, you're going to love it. Right. And it was the same thing with the companions. I mean, you take someone, for example, you mentioned the narration of drinking. You know how hard it is to quit? If you right? But they did it. Right? Why? For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they understood that, you know, it's going to, there's something better, there's something bigger out there. The religion has given you all the, you know, answers to all the questions that you have, all the reasons, all the purposes, everything. You just have to look at it with the right lens. And if you don't, or if you look at it with the wrong lens, you're going to fall victim to the fitna that's around you.
And I think a lot of that, Hafiz, I'm sorry to cut you off, but a lot of that has to do with people adding their own opinions. This is what I think, and this is what I believe, and this is how I take it. And I think that one in itself, like to your point, knowledge will decrease and scholars will be leaving this. We've lost, even in our era, lost some juggernauts of the religion. But the concept is the ones who have that knowledge, I find that are hidden. They don't want to be known, and they don't want to be, out there and stuff. And we all know names that we can say that they're just gems. They're quiet now. They've gone into that era where they're just, day by day, and they're in their ibadat and so on and so forth. Hafiz, you were going to say something about in regards to that?
Yeah, no, I was agreeing with what Hafiz was saying. I just wanted to give like an example as to what you're saying fitna will prevail, right? On the last podcast, we were talking about Sufi cults, and I'm going to tie this example to that.
Yeah.
Is that, think of this scenario where you have a group of people,
right?
Let's say in a third country village, right?
Right.
And they're following this fake sheikh or this fake beat or this someone who doesn't have the qualifications to be that which he says, right? Now, how do you work to convert their thought or their process? Like, how do we fix those people that are living there? How do we get them to turn away from that person, right? You think it's going to be easy?
No, not at all.
For the ulama, the ones, who speak out against it or trying to combat this fitna, salam to them. They're doing their best, right? But when you think about it on a broader perspective like that, for example, whatever you're saying is just going to go through one ear and out the ear of the other ear of those people within that village.
Yeah.
Right? That's the ignorance that we have today. Right?
And you know what? It's sometimes I'm baffled. And honestly, I'm baffled because, and then I think to myself, I'm like, we all know that whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives hidayah to, nobody can take it away. And whoever Allah takes hidayah away from, nobody can give him hidayah except for Allah. And it's so true that you see some of these people who now have glued to these people who look the part of a Muslim sheikh, but obviously have no amal. And we talked about that in Sufi cults and stuff. One of the other big things is the core roots of Islam and what Islam stood for. What was the first thing that Kuffar of Makkah called the Prophet ﷺ before Alan Nabuwat?
Sadiq and Amin.
100%. He was trustworthy. So that tells us in itself that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he prevailed in that many things, but he excelled in showing that he's trustworthy and showing that he's a truthful one, right? Is that apparent now? That's one of the signs that there's going to be no trust amongst people, right? And that I think is very scary because people will say things and people will be deemed liars. Truthful people will be deemed liars and liars will be deemed truthful. And that's, to your point, Hafiz Bilal, that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah, but you also solve the answer in the question too. Because here's now, the problem over there is people treat things with sentiment. Their answers lie within emotions, right?
Right.
They don't understand ilm, they don't understand knowledge. If you try to give them, where it's the exact opposite over here. Okay? Now, the biggest problem that we faced is we brought scholars who were trained for that, how to answer with sentiment. And we took them and we shipped them here. And they started to answer with sentiment. The kid doesn't understand. The kid is always taught knowledge. You have to fight knowledge with knowledge. So that's why a lot of these kids still don't understand. You're fighting with sentiment. Right? The Moy Sab doesn't like an answer. Allama Sab doesn't like an answer. He's going to whack you across the face. At least that was the case for me. But, this is what I'm saying. Like, if you sat down and you tried to explain to the person, right? I'm not saying that just the scholars are at fault. It's we as an entire generation are at fault.
100%.
But, again, I'm just pointing out some of these problems so you can kind of see it for yourself, right? And it's this very simple solution. If in this part of the world, we fight knowledge with knowledge. Over there, they have their own way. They have their tariqah to do it. And to those ulama, they know how to do it. But here, in this world, our kids are equipped to always ask that one question, why?
Right.
How are you going to answer that?
Yeah.
Can't answer it with sentiment.
No,
you have to answer with knowledge.
Yeah, knowledge fights knowledge. One of the other ones that stands out to me is a man will walk by a grave and wish that we'll talk to the person in the grave and say, I wish I was in your spot. Why does that stand out? I mean, I know why it stands out to me, because one, do you want to be in this world with all this test and trials and tribulations and so on and so forth? And is it going to get that bad that a person will say, I want to be there rather than be on this world? Your kind of take on that one. I'd rather be in the grave.
when
Sorry to throw a curveball.
no, that's fine. No, that's perfectly fine. I'm just trying to correlate thoughts.
No.
When a person says that I'd rather be in someone else's position,
Yeah.
we have, what is that saying? You don't know how a person is or how they are until you walk 2
in their
miles
shoes.
in
Yeah,
their shoes,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So how do you know what's happening in the grave is going to be better? But we've surrounded ourselves with that notion, hey, this dunya is all that I need, right? Or this dunya is all that there is.
Right.
Hence why the person goes to the grave and says, I wish I was in your position.
Right.
They don't know the reality that the person in the grave might be worse off, might be even better off. Right. Something that relates to me on this point is, Sayyidina Anas narrated another hadith in, I believe it was Sahih al-Bukhari or Sahih Muslim. A man comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he asks, when is Qiyamah? Or when is the end of time? When is the hour? Right? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam doesn't reply with an exact date or a time. He doesn't even answer it to that extent. He says, what have you done to prepare for it? Right? And the person replies, I have done nothing except that I have love for Allah and His Rasul.
Yep.
And the Prophet replies, Anta ma'a man ahbabta. You're going to be
with the ones you love.
With the ones you love. Right? And Sayyidina Anas, while narrating this hadith, he says, I have never seen the Prophet more happier than when he said those words.
Right.
And so when I die, I want to make sure that I have love for the Prophet, Allah, Abu Bakr, and Omar, so that I'm there, so that they are my only hope to go into Jannah, because I have no trust on my actions. Right? So that whole sort of concept is that this dunya isn't everything. Right? No matter what is going on, no matter what it is in this life is a gift to you. Right? There's a reason why in Islam suicide is haram. Right? This life is not yours. It's an amana upon you. Right? You have to live it according to the one who gave it to you.
Right.
Right.
Another one is like naked. Oh, sorry, you were going to say something?
I was going to say that. So if you ever are in that position where you said, I wish I was dead, or I wish I was in this person's shoes, right? To me, it's like you're telling Allah, whatever you've done for me, it's not nothing.
Right.
Right? Allah literally says He's the most forgiving, most merciful. You just need to come to Him. If you're thirsty, you're going to go to the water.
Of course.
The water's not going to come to you.
Of course not.
You just have to take that first step.
Yeah.
Right? So by saying that, you're also insulting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? He will always forgive you. You just have to ask for it.
Right.
So you need to also, be mindful when you say things like this too, right? It's like they can hold a lot of more consequences than what you may think in the moment.
And that's I think people don't realize. And I think a lot of forgiveness, we don't know what we're asking for forgiveness. It's just on the tongue, right? Istighfar, and you look at narrations of the Prophet ﷺ making istighfar at least 70 times in a day, and so on and so forth. I mean, the Prophet doesn't need to make istighfar. Let's be clear on one thing, right? For our brothers who are viewing and say that the Prophet sins, na'udhu billah. But he doesn't need to. But why did the Anbiya ask for forgiveness, make tawbah, make dua in this manner? It's for us to as an example for us and how we should be doing this. And so many prophets, right? Sayyidina Yaqub, Sayyidina Yusuf, Sayyidina Yunus, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, Sayyidina Musa. Everyone asked for forgiveness. They didn't sin for us. And the concept of forgiveness, and I think self-realization, is what we're missing. Istighfar is just loose on the tongue, just like alhamdulillah and insha'Allah and wallahi and all these words that are on our zuban so quickly. They're just words. It's nothing is going to be that ayatul mubarak. You guys, mashallah, are Hafiz, Surah Arad. Inna Allah la yaghfiru. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not affect change on a nation hatta. I forgot the ending, but you guys are Surah Arad, verse 11, I think it is. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't invoke change on a nation until they change themselves. Right? And that's the whole concept. Is what is Allah saying here is that you don't change yourself. You don't take that step. Like Hafiz Yahya is saying, you don't take that step first to understand, realize, and then make that change. It's not going to get better. You're going to be still in the same circle. And that's that little wind tunnel. But go ahead.
Just wanted to add two things, and I'll bring it back full circle on the second one. But the first one, like you were mentioning, there's instances where the prophets have asked or made du'as that you would think a person who is guaranteed Jannah, a person who is sinless, shouldn't be making this du'a, right? And you're right, it's for us. And I've had this conversation with yourself, is one of my favorite ayahs in the Quran, right? In Surah Yusuf. After Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, everything that he went through, the trials, he went to jail, when he came out, he became the minister, or he became the king, the famine and all that. Even when his dream became true, where he had the moon and the sun, moon and the sun prostrating to him and the stars as his brothers. After all of that occurred, Sayyidina Yusuf makes a dua. And towards the end of the dua, he says, Tawaffani Musliman wa alhiqni bis salihin. Oh Allah, cause me to die a Muslim and raise me with the pious. Right? And this is for us. It's giving you an example of how you should be making dua and what should be your concern. And I'm trying to remember the second point. Yes, Hafiz was mentioning, the first step that you have to do is just make that first step to Allah, right? And if you're ever worried about Allah is not going to be able to forgive me, or my sins have gone too far, too extreme.
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says that from the start of this dunya until Qiyamah, only a portion of his mercy has been reserved for that.
Allahu Akbar.
I believe it was 99 parts, or it was 70 parts, I believe. I can't remember the exact. But the rest of that mercy, or the rest of those portions of mercy, are saved for Qiyamah.
Allahu Akbar. The ayatul mubarak, inna Allah la yughayru ma biqawmin hatta yughayru ma bi anfusihim. Sorry. So that was the ayah that I was talking about. But to your point, is people don't I think the first concept is they don't understand Allah. Because they don't know. They don't have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is robotic. Istighfar is the robotic. Dua is robotic. Ramadan becomes robotic, and so on and so forth, and all of these things. Oh yeah, 100%. And that's the whole concept, that part of your identity as a Muslim is understanding. Like you said about Sayyidina Anas, there were so many. There's another rawayat of Sayyidina Abu Darda that have the same concept, where the Prophet ﷺ became Jalal, and he says, I just love you. And he smiled, and he says, prepare to be tested, and so on and so forth. But one thing I want to touch on, so because a lot of these signs of the final hour and the end of times is apparent to Muslims, and one of them is nakedness. And one thing we don't understand is, when I think about this, I think about how Sayyidatuna Fatima radiallahu anha, that the sun never seen the libas of Sayyidatuna Fatima. And I relate to, Sayyidatuna Aisha, for example, who would stand behind a curtain and then give tabligh and dawah to people who came and asked questions after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, and these people who protected the hijab, and hijab not meaning what's on your head, just consoled their nakedness for the sake of Allah and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nowadays you have people who are clothed but they're naked. Your take on that amongst the Muslim ummah?
There's a saying I read not too long ago, but basically if we looked at it, that when man first started, it was naked. As man progressed intellectually, they put more and more clothes on, right? So I'm gonna use the Western, the caveman, then you actually had people that wore abnormal clothes and stuff like that coming into this part of time, or this era of time, right? If you looked at, for example, the 1800s, the 1900s, people were fully clothed. Even when they go out, it looked like, they're going out for, something very fancy, but they were fully clothed, right? Now, and that was like, it was, if you didn't wear, like, if you didn't cover up, if you didn't, do any of that, you were looked upon as like, what's wrong with you? Or you looked like the outcast. Right? But I said this a few episodes ago. When you give a human too much freedom, they don't know what to do.
Right.
Now, when you say you can be anything and everything and whatever you want to, and you can wear whatever you want. Yes, you can wear whatever you want. Right? But there's two things here. One, what kind of morals are you presenting when you're walking around naked? Right? And the other thing is, you're not just responsible for yourself, but you now gave an excuse for everyone else to see you. Because that your body is an amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the way you treat it, it will speak on the day of judgment of how
100%.
you treated it.
100%.
So when you lose your morality, when you lose your shame, right? That's what becomes of you. You start, you end up walking around naked.
Mm-hmm.
So if you walk around, to me, it's like the less intellect you have, the less clothes you have. That's simple.
And you know what the thing is? When we think nakedness, we think women. But men are just as bad, right? We have men who are wearing girl clothing, right? Like they're actually shopping for girl pants because they want it to be tighter. And then you have the women who are dressed, but it's so tight. I mean, you can see obviously the shape of their body and this and that, and then and that's the whole concept, that they're clothed but they're naked, and they're doing it for what? Viewership. They don't understand. And you look at the pious women of Islam, like the ones we mentioned, it was the complete opposite, right? Hatta they wouldn't even, awaz will be considered hijab, and there would be hijab on the awaz from the great women of Islam, right? And you know what? I'm never surprised, because everything the Prophet ﷺ said is obviously coming true, has come true, and will continue to come true. But don't our women know, or don't our men know what hijab is, the definition of hijab? And why is it that it's on the back burner, so to speak, with all of everything that we're talking about?
They don't, because they were taught through sentiment. All they know is, okay, I need to cover up from here to here. Right. That's it. Yeah. Everything else is fair game. All right. The problem is we're too busy looking for the minimum. What's the least that I can do? Not to say this is just the bar, because Islam is a universal religion. Right. So the commandments and the rules they don't look at money, they don't look at status, they don't look at any of that. So the minimum was for if you are applicable at the minimum. If you can do over the minimum, you should be doing over the minimum. Right. You should be approaching the maximum. Right. But that's not the way we look at it. We look at it, Allah only said for males just above the navel to just below the knees. Right. Well, brother, we're in the 21st century. We're not living in the caveman era, or we're not out in the wild west. Like we're cultured, intellectual human beings. Right. So start dressing like it. But no, you want that attention. Because that is also what sells. The marketing and the media, they sell that nakedness. So they think in order to be more attractive, to be more presentable. Right. Okay. Simple question then, brother or sister. Why don't your parents go outside walking around naked like that? Right.
Very true. Yeah.
Come on, be real with me, right? Yeah. Why don't your parents go around walking around in the streets, right, naked like that? I'm pretty sure they don't know you're doing it either.
And why are you hiding it when you're going out? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Again, you're doing it because you don't understand the very core tenets of your own faith and your belief. Right? And if you do, you were taught it in a way that, unfortunately, you're looking for the flaws rather than looking for the positives within it.
Right.
And once you start doing that, just to add on, it's a slippery slope. Mm-hmm. The moment you start to make an excuse for something, or to do something that you know is wrong, or that you've heard is wrong, the moment you start that one excuse, shaitan's right there. Yeah. That second excuse is there. That third one is right there. Yeah. Hafiz said the minimum for a man, according to Hanafi fiqh, is from the navel to below the knees.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're going to say, hey, that's all I need to do. That's all that was required of me. Right? Tomorrow, it's going to be above the knees. Yeah. Right. And then it's going to be less. And then it's going to be till the abdomen. Yeah. Right. And then eventually you get to what you were saying, nakedness.
Yeah. And it's a shocker in all, right? Because we see this, but to your point, Hafiz is sex sells in this day and age. And I say this all the time. For example, you go to countries where we're from, India, Pakistan, and Pakistan more because it's an Islamic country, and you see big billboards. Remember, it's Islamic Republic of Pakistan. But there's nothing Islamic about it, right? Very little. And I'll quote my brother, and he says, he goes, Islam is gone from Pakistan. Very few people. Like it's to your point, it's not it's a hobby now. Now here's the concept. You look at every billboard. Remember, there's adhan going off 5 times a day, 365 days of the year. It's an Islamic country, and you see big billboards on shampoo. Selling Dove shampoo, and there's a woman who's half dressed, and it's I used to see it when I used to go. I don't go anymore, but this is what happens. And look what's happening in Saudi Arabia, where they're saying they're having concerts and stuff like that, and we all know about that. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but sex sells. It drives in money because that is what the ultimate goal is, to make as much money as possible. So that some of the things that we talked about is minor signs, right? So we talked about adultery, we talked about nakedness, like we just said. We talked about the increase of men, increase of women versus men. We talked about disobedience to parents. So I'm just summing it up for people so they know. We talked about fitna, and people will be okay with the fitna. We'll talk about knowledge will be decreasing. People fall trapped to fitna. We talked about jahiliyyah. All of these things are now. Drinking of alcohol, adultery, zina, so on and so forth. I guess the meat and potatoes now comes in, is about where everybody wants to hear about is the major signs. Because that's the big shocker. And unfortunately, to be honest with you, is our ummah, illa mashallah, is not ready for the major signs. So let's start there. I think the bridge between the minor and the major signs, and this is all including in like the minor signs, building the towers, people will compete in building tall buildings, destroy mountaintops, greenery in Saudi, in Hijaz.
Say that actually, yeah.
But the bridge from minor to major signs, where I want to start, is the Antichrist. So Imam Mahdi is a minor sign, apparently, according to narrations, which I think it's a major sign. But the bridge is Imam Mahdi. So let's start there. Some people believe that Imam Mahdi is in hiding and that he's always been here and that he will come out. There's a sector of Islam that believes in them.
There's a sector, not of Islam. There's a sector. There's a sect that believes that.
Yes, I
they
stand
cannot
corrected.
back that claim. Again, it's sentimental value versus actual intellectual intelligence. And nevertheless, these big signs, think of it. First of all, you can't even fight. You're not combat trained. How are you going to get behind the Dajjal or Ya'juj, Ma'juj or any of these, you're going to be, in a way, you're going to be trembling in your pants, for lack of better words, right? Imagine this. The Dajjal comes to you and he says, okay, listen, if you accept me as your Lord, I will give you Jannah, and he'll show you one Jannah. And then he says, if you don't, I'm going to send you to my hell. Right? But he's going to show it to you. Right? Mm-hmm. How many people would fall trapped to this in this day and age? Muslim, non-Muslim. Non-Muslim we know, but Muslims, a lot of us would, because we don't even know how to approach the situation. We love to hear the folk tales, the stories, and all these narrations and stuff. But what do we do out of it? We just listen to it. It goes in 1 year. It was it was like a lot of fun to listen to, and it was emotional and this and that. But what are we getting out of it? Are you taking the core message from it home? Yeah. Right? So, like I said, the Dajjal will come up to you and I'll ask you, hey, if you accept me as your Lord. So someone will say, okay, how do I accept you as my Lord? Show me something. So the Dajjal or this person will say, okay, listen, my father so-and-so died. Bring him back to life. So Shaitan will be there. He will he will replicate himself into the form of that person's father or mother. Right. And it will come alive in front of him. Mm-hmm. And so you just gave your word to say, hey, I'm going to accept you. So now you've just accepted the Dajjal. And what will happen is the Dajjal will send you into his Jannah. But it like his name, it is just a cover. It's false. Inside actually is a hell. Right. His Jannah will be Jahannam, and his Jahannam will be a Jannah. Right. The question to everyone that's viewing this is, are you ready to stand in front of the Dajjal and answer this? Right.
The concept is, and I want you to continue because I think that's a good point. People need to understand the concept. The Prophet ﷺ said, which scares the you-know-what out of me, is he ﷺ said that I'm here to warn you the same way the Anbiya Rasul ﷺ warned their nations about the biggest fitna that you will face, and that's Al-Masih ad-Dajjal. And I'm here too, standing here, telling you about this. Him sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that you don't want to see Dajjal, because I pray for my ummah who sees Dajjal. If the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying this, Dajjal is not just someone you could just fling off and whatnot. You will fall trap to Al-Masih ad-Dajjal.
You will, because he'll be here for a very long time. So the narrations mention 40 days. But they also break it down to say the first day will be like a year, the second will be like a month, and the third will be like a week, and then the other days will be normal. Now you tell me, what part of the world will he not touch? There's
Everywhere.
only 2 places on the face of this planet he will not be able to go, Makkah, Medina.
Right.
However, let's just say, for example, you try to be smart here and say, okay, you know what? The Dajjal's here. I'm going to run to Makkah, Medina. Brother, there's going to be other things that happen in Makkah, Medina that will force all the people who actually don't believe out.
Yeah.
Right? So there goes your escape plan.
Yeah.
Right?
And to your point, just touching on that, is that he will stand on the outskirts. And when we went, we saw the palaces in the mountain where he would stand up, and he will cause the earth to tremble, and it will shake. And people from Makkah and Medina will then be like, no, he has to be what he says he is, so I'm out. And those people will leave the sanctity of Haramain Sharifain, and they will come out and they will fall trap to Al-Masih Dajjal. Like, think about that. Like, you know what the thing that I keep thinking about is, we can talk about it. We know about it. We know about the Hadith. We know about the narrations. We're talking about Al-Masih Dajjal. We know what he's going to do. And still, people are going to fall trap. Why? They're still going to fall trap knowing. So imagine, like, for example, use me as an example. I don't want to use anybody else. We talk all this game and say, Masih Dajjal, we know about him. We know what he's going to say, heaven and hell. We know it's going to be opposite. We know he's going to raise the parents from the dead, but they're not going to be. It's a deception. And then he's going to do it to me, but I'm going to fall trap. Knowing what we're talking about sitting here, and with all the knowledge, and still fall trap. Why are they going to fall trap? Why do you think they're going to fall trap to him? Even with the knowledge. There's not a Muslim out there that I would say that doesn't know about Al-Masih Dajjal. You hear about it.
You know, if we're still alive, then we'll see for ourselves.
Yeah.
But Allah protect us from those days.
I mean.
But, you know, why it occurs is that's a test for you as well.
Yeah.
Right? I've said this a couple of times before as well. When we reach those days, Iman is like what?
Hot
coal in our hands. Yeah. Right? Those that don't have Iman but claim to be. Right? We are hypocrites at the end of the day. We say one thing and we do something else.
Right.
Or we believe in something and we do something else, or vice versa, or some form of it, right? We're not true Muslims anymore. Right? When we know all these facts, right? For example, you know what he looks like. You know what's written on his forehead. You know how many eyes he has. You know what's in his hands. You know what he's going to say to you. You even know what he's going to say to you. You even know what people are going to ask him.
Right.
You have all of this detail, and yet people will still fall into, right? Because rooting out the real from the fake.
I just want to say something because it reminded me of, like, you know, high school and middle school. It's like the teacher gave you the exam bank with the answers, yet you still failed.
It's true. Yeah.
Like, we can't help you.
Yeah. It's true.
Right? Allah is literally giving you all the questions, all the answers, how to go about doing it, and you're still not, you know, listening to it. You still want to gallivant and do what you want to do, and, you know, you're so sold on this temporary life, and you're not understanding that, hey, this is just this is a temptation, and it's kind of like a dream.
Right.
The real test is after this.
Yep.
Right. There's also narrations and the tafsirs and stuff. They mentioned that the army that will take down Imam Mahdi, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam and Imam Mahdi, the army that will take down the Dajjal, their army, it will be of 600 people, 200 men and 400 women. Right now, you have over 1 billion Muslims on this planet. If you can't even form a line around Hajar al-Aswad to kiss and touch the stone properly, how are you going to fight and pick amongst yourself, or you know, to choose who's going to be amongst that 600?
Right. Powerful. Right? Very powerful.
So knowing all these signs, knowing all that's great. It's good to empower yourself with not, but what are you doing proactively to be able to make sure that you don't fall trap into these? Right. Again, there's going to be other things even before Ya'juj and Ma'juj and Dajjal. There's going to be Dabbatul Ard, which is even more scarier. He has the staff of Sayyidina Musa and the ring of Sayyidina Sulaiman. How are you going to face these challenges? That's the more critical question that, you know, people that are listening should be asking. Right? It's good to know the signs. It's good to be aware of them. But how do you approach them? So take a simple example. When you're driving, you know the rules for the signs. You don't ask why a stop sign was put there. Right? But you know what to do when you approach that stop sign. You stop, you look both ways, and then you proceed.
Roll a little bit.
Yes. But you don't just shoot right through it because you know there's consequences.
Absolutely.
Right? There's consequences. Just because you can't physically see them or touch them doesn't mean they're not there. And if you fail it now, you're going to face the consequences as soon as you die. And then when you're resurrected again, and then in the afterlife as well. So you're messing yourself up for 3 different phases there forever, almost. And, think of it. You're looking at this scenario or this approach, good to arm yourself with knowledge, but ask yourself deep down inside, have I prepared for this? And what am I doing to prepare for it?
Yeah, on that note, as to why you fail. Hafiz just said, you're giving the questions and the answers. The teacher gave you everything, and yet you're still failing the exam. When kids study for a test, they're prepping for that test.
Right.
They're putting in hours beforehand.
Right.
They're putting in time beforehand and effort beforehand to get ready to answer the questions. Right? Some kids do well, some kids do half and half, but that's all based on their preparation.
Right.
Right?
Even
Like
with the
you
cheat
said,
sheet?
Even regardless.
Right.
But like you said, we know all of these details and we're still failing.
Yeah.
We failed to prep. Right? We had all our life, but we were just looking for the signs.
Right.
We didn't do anything in between.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to go on a little bit of tangent here on questions and answers. People say that Islam's a dark religion. All it talks about in the Quran is Jahannam and punishment and adab, and that's it. Right? It's not. Where you have instances where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing and giving you the details of what's going to happen and what Hashr looks like and what adab looks like, what the nar looks like. Right after that, you have what Jannah looks like. In Surah Al-Qaf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Jahannam, يَوْمَ نَقُولُ لِجَهَنَّمَ هَلِ امْتَلَأْتِ وَتَقُولُ هَلْ مِن مَزِيدٍ. Jahannam will say, is there more? Or is that it?
No.
Right after that, just 4 verses down, Allah talks about those who will go to Jannah.
Yeah.
وَدْخُلُوهَا بِسَلَامٍ. Now you enter with peace.
Yeah.
Right? And Surah Al-Mudaththir, questions and answers. قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ وَلَمْ نَكُ نُطْعِمُ الْمِسْكِينَ وَكُنَّا نَخُوضُ مَعَ الْخَائِضِينَ. They will be asked, why didn't you pray? Why didn't you feed the poor? Your answers are right there. Right after that, it speaks about Jannah.
Yep.
Every single person who denounced the belief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world, when they're resurrected on the day of judgment, they will go up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they'll say, Allah, send us back now. We believe.
Yeah, it's too late.
Why? Because we've seen you. We see with our own eyes.
Yeah.
But that is a true test, that even if you did not see him, you still believed based on his signs. Now, we talked about one thing that, Allah gave you all the questions, the answers, and everything, right? To be honest with you, it's a better deal in the Quranic law book than any law book of today. And I'll tell you why. Open any law book, they tell you the consequences. It's all full of consequences. You can't do this, this is the punishment. You steal, this is the punishment. Do this is the punishment.
Right.
It doesn't tell you, hey, for example, I'm going to use a stop sign. If you stop at a stop sign, what's the reward for that? Well, you're living. The other person that may be crossing the road might be living. It doesn't tell you the pros for it. It all it does is tells you the consequences when you're learning the rules. So you're okay with just learning consequences and knowing them and memorizing them. But you're not okay with opening the book that tells you, hey, these are the signs, there are consequences. But this is what you can also do to avoid getting
100%.
into that mess.
100%.
And these are the rewards at the same time.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to put this out there and then move on from Dajjal. So you remember that, and I'm not someone who watches TV shows and everything, but there was a segment on the Messiah. It came out on Netflix. I'm not sure if you guys know about it, but it was a lot of controversy and it was all about Al-Masih Dajjal and so on and so forth. So just recently I watched it, but I watched it with the lens of the Islamic lens. Like, what can we get out of it? And what can we learn from it? And everything I always seen, that we know that he's Al-Masih Dajjal. We know that he's, he never comes out and says, I'm Dajjal in the show. But then you know what happens? He slowly, Allah gives him ability because he gives everything to him. And then he stays firm on what his mission is to deceive everybody. And then what happens is, through his constant deception, he continuously changes people's minds just by his words and just by doing what he's doing. To your point, that 600 people are going to be with Imam Mahdi and going to be with Sayyidina Isa. The world population is going to be majority of Muslims. So we're going to be over 50% of the world's population, whatever the population is going to be at the time when Dajjal comes. But with Imam Mahdi, is only going to be 600 people. That just tells you that how many people are going to go to Al-Masih Dajjal. Do you want to take those odds? You want to be like, you want to be there at that time and go against it. That's how powerful this message is about Al-Masih ad-Dajjal. You're going to fall trap for him because he's not going to stop. Regardless of what happens, you fleeing and running to Medina Munawwara, you think that's going to be easy? You don't think there's going to be blockades and be like, nobody's allowed here and all these things are going to happen? Your iman needs to be on point now. And that's what it is. Iman wale, the people with iman, with tawakkul and all of this, are going to be the ones who are going to be with Imam Mahdi at that time. And which leads me to the army of Imam Mahdi, which an army will arise from Khurasan. And beware of the black flags. They were the ones who are going to be, not beware, be aware, not beware, be aware of the black flags that will rise from Khurasan, which is another major sign of the end of times, because that's emerge from there will be the fighters of the real mujahideen of Islam. Can we touch on why Khurasan? Why do you think just Khurasan?
And deflect that one to you.
Well, I'll tell you what I think.
Okay.
That when we look at Khurasan now, and shout out to my Stan brothers, and excluding Pakistan, but I mean Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and the other stans, and especially shout out to Habib. But the concept is that when you look at all these Islamic world countries, you see Tawheed. You see Tawheed in those countries. No matter how many people have tried to bombard Afghanistan, whether it's the Russians or the Americans and so on and so forth, they've always stayed firm on Sharia. Always. And I believe because Tawheed is still evident amongst these Islamic countries, because look, everyone wants to paint the picture that Saudi Arabia is the poster child for Islam, which is not. You never hear noise, quote unquote, from the Stan world, Tajikistan, and so on and so forth, and Afghanistan. That's what I believe. That they're so so enriched in Tawheed and the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that those are the people that are going to come out and fight because that's what they stand for.
If you look at their lives that they live, they might not live the most modern life.
Of course.
They live very simple lives.
Absolutely.
But what comes first in their hearts is, like you said, is taqwa in Allah.
Yeah.
Right? They are happy with what they have. There's no constant chase. They are living their lives for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Sure.
We are not living our lives for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why a lot of people don't find peace. They're chasing this peace that they'll get when they're retired 50 or whatever with the white picket fence and all that. That's not peace. That's too late.
Yeah.
This is your prime time.
Right.
You want to find peace? Allah gave you the solution. Remember Him. He will remember you.
Absolutely.
Right? Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Right? That verily in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ease of the hearts. Thank you. So these people, and again, when you look at a sign, don't just look at the sign and take it for the tale or for the narration. Look deeper into it.
Right.
Why that specific place? It's because of the way those people are.
Absolutely.
Right? It's the way they live their lives, and it's the way they conduct themselves.
Right.
No one's telling you have to live under a hut or make a hut or something like that and isolate yourself. It's the simplicity in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another major sign you just touched on, because we talked about, is we have, obviously Imam Mahdi and the arrival of Al-Masih ad-Dajjal. And then we have, you touched on it, you just briefly touched on it, was the arrival, the return of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. So when we touch on that, Hafiz Bilal, because that's another major sign, because he's going to be the one that's going to kill Al-Masih ad-Dajjal.
There's a group of people that believe Sayyidina Isa has already passed.
Na'uzubillah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you read the Quran,
they believe in the Punjabi prophet. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you read the Quran with the right people and the right... No, that's perfectly fine. That's needed. But with the right people and with the right knowledge, the right mindset, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ لَفِي شَكٍّ مِّنْهُ مَا لَهُمْ بِهِ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِلَّا اتِّبَاعَ الظَّنِّ وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ يَقِينًا بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ.
After death.
And from there you can see that Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam is promised to come back, not as a Nabi, but as a Ummati of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Because his mission has already been fulfilled.
Absolutely.
Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam finished his da'wah, and that mission passed to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Alayhi salatu
And Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last of the prophets, right?
Bishak.
And after Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, he will come as in ummati. Some also have the claim that he is actually a Sahabi as well, because he's seen the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Al-Isra wal Mi'raj. So it's another thing as well. But he will come and give and try to preach iman to the وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ, right? To the people of the book, right? And you know, that group that thinks that passed away and someone else fulfilled that prophecy, people of the book do not have iman, right?
Correct.
So what you believe is going against the Quran,
Yeah.
right?
I'm trying very hard. I'm trying very.
I'll say it for you. Okay, look, I'm gonna nullify that belief very quickly. Okay, for argument's sake, we'll say that you're right.
Okay. Yeah.
That the Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam will pass away according to your belief.
Okay.
Okay, and your Messiah apparently came in the last 50, 100 years. But man, I'm sorry, man. The brother passed away on the toilet. I'm not even gonna say passed away. That's too nice. He died on the toilet. He claimed prophecy. He claimed all sorts of things, and you guys contradict your own selves.
Right.
You guys have two major parties within yourselves, and you contradict your own beliefs on his status.
Right.
So first of all, is he a Messiah? Is he a prophet?
Yeah.
So if you can't even figure that out, you don't have the
He
right to
himself was
comment.
conflicted.
That too. But what I'm trying to say is that if you guys can't even figure that out, you don't have the right to comment on this, and you're not backed by any proof. You don't have any proof to claim that this is what it is. I'm sorry, it's cultish behavior, and it's this sentimental value that's attached with it, and that's why you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
Right?
I just find it's just garbage that's being thrown on the sake of iman. Like you're trying to pull for, what do you call it? Pull for strings, right? You're just trying to grab for something to hold on for dear life. My biggest concept with them is, like, I know you mentioned the beautiful Ayatul Mubarak. He wasn't crucified, and he wasn't he wasn't killed, or he wasn't crucified. And here's the thing. If he was Imam Mahdi, so let's say he was, okay, for argument's sake, it wasn't Imam Mahdi. The Prophet ﷺ in Sahih Hadith, and this is in Muslim Sharif, and he said that he talked about Imam Mahdi, and he says who Imam Mahdi is going to be. He's going to be from my lineage. His father's name will be my name. This brother, not even a brother, this guy is.
We don't know if he identified as a guy.
Yeah. This Punjabi so-called prophet said that, he doesn't even know his father. He doesn't even know his father because there was some ikhtilaf with his mother and this and that. You can read Ruhani Khuzain, and it will talk a lot about that. And then, but his father's name, what he says allegedly he was his father, was not Abdullah, like it was for the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidina Abdullah. And he said that he will be his name will be my name. This guy didn't have that name. And then on top of that, he would be from my lineage. This Punjabi prophet on opium was high on opium, first of all. He was not a Sayyid, he was not Ahlul Sadat, he was not from Banu Hashim, he was no lineage associated, not even close. This guy didn't even speak Arabic. And I just want to know if he says that Wahi came to him, which is kufr, and did Wahi come in Punjabi to him?
Opium talks in a lot of different languages.
If it came in Arabic, and I want to say this,
whatever he was smoking, that must have been good for him. But again, coming back to the point, the Prophet ﷺ also said there will be 40 false prophets between his time and the end of time, or 40 false dajjals.
Bishak.
The ulama have, I can say probably consensus amongst them, have classified him as one, as a false prophet, as a dajjal, right? Because again, if you lay claim to something, we're not stopping you in the sense that we're not just going to say no to you, we'll listen to you, but you have to back that up. It has to make sense, and it has to line up with what we've been told.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
If it doesn't, I'm sorry, we're going to say you are contradictory, and we're going to reject you.
Absolutely.
And if that revelation came in Arabic, okay, and your successors, so to speak, are supposed to be the Khalifas of the world, so to speak, then they should also know how to read Arabic or speak Arabic.
100%.
Right? I urge all the listeners, when they have a spare minute,
Literally a minute.
just YouTube their current head trying to read Surah Al-Fatiha. Just listen to that. Just a minute. That's all you have to spare. And then don't give these group of people a second thought. You don't need more than that.
And Surah Lahab, yeah.
There's a lot, but I'm
3
saying
lines and he's
just give it a
reading
minute.
off a sheet of paper. Like, it's crazy.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala issued a challenge in the Quran to the kuffar at the time. And to the end of time, He's issued this challenge. He said, just produce one ayah like the Quran.
Allahu Akbar.
Acha chalo, you said you're a Muslim, you said you're a prophet. You said you got revelation, quote unquote. Give us one verse like the Quran.
Yeah.
At least attempt it.
Yeah.
Right? You couldn't. It's very easy to break this personality or this individual down, and honestly, he's either schizophrenic or paranoid or some sort of weird.
The opium.
Yeah, it's the crack that he's smoking that that is talking.
100%.
But again, take from the moral. The story might be funny or it might be a laugh or it might be whatever. It's sad at the end of the day, but take from the message at the end of the day that there will be many tests and tribulations that will come in different forms, right? It's how you react, how you approach the situation, how you react. And even before that, it's about preparing for that. If you were to face that, right? If you are going to, if the Dajjal and everything, it really, gets your blood pumping and stuff, ask yourself this: am I ready to be face to face with Dajjal? And if you're not, then you need to focus on getting ready if you were going to meet him.
Right.
And that goes back to the basics of arming yourself with knowledge and then applying that knowledge as well. Right? Because there's no point of knowing everything, but then not doing anything about it, then you're hypocritical at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So another major sign was the Dajjalun, right? The 40 Dajjalun that will come and so on and so forth. So we touched on Al-Masih Dajjal, we talked about the Dajjal, Dajjalun with the 40, about this guy, the Punjabi prophet. And we talked about Sayyidina Isa returning. There are some other major signs. So I want to briefly touch on that and then end it with what we've been saving, which is the scariest part of the podcast, I believe, that will come out. So another one that comes out is, obviously, you mentioned it quite a few times, Hafiz, is Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Can you touch base on Gog and Magog?
I'm going to summarize it because that's a very detailed topic. But they are 2 tribes of human-like, or you can say humans.
Right.
And they were encapsulated by Dhul Qarnayn.
Right.
The story is in Surah Al-Kahf. Right. And again, you read Surah Al-Kahf every Friday, you'll know these things.
Absolutely.
So they were causing ruckus to the people. So I'm summarizing here. So Sayyidina Dhul Qarnayn encapsulated them with an iron wall. Right. And what they try to do is, obviously, if you encapsulate someone, they're going to try to get out. So they dig every single day. They dig. Some say they also lick the wall. Basically, they try to penetrate through the wall. And every single day, they get an opening where there's light. They can see the other side. And they say, you know what? We'll finish it tomorrow. Because by the time they finish, the day's over.
Right.
So they say, we'll finish tomorrow. And when they come back the next day, the wall, by the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is back to how it originally was before they started trying to penetrate it.
Right.
There will come a day, and it's mentioned in Surah Kahf, that at the end of the day, when they can see the light on the other side, they will say, Inshallah. And when that day comes, the following day, when they resume or they come back to the wall, the hole will be like how they left it the previous day.
Right.
And they will be able to get out. And they will cause a havoc. And they will wreak havoc upon the earth.
Right.
So much so, and their numbers are so great, Allah knows best what their numbers are, but they will be passing by a river. And the start of the army, or of these tribes, they'll start drinking. By the time the end, or the last set of people in this army, or the tribes, come to the river, they will look and say, hey, there used to be water here. What happened to that? Imagine how many people that must be. Drinking. If you're going to drink a lake or a big body of water dry, right? They will go everywhere. And they will take everyone for annihilate the earth. Right? So, and then when they're finished killing on the earth, they will point their spears towards the heavens. Because they'll say, oh, we've claimed the earth. Now we'll claim the skies. So they'll take their arrows and they'll throw them into the skies. Right. The malaika will catch them and they will paint them red and let them fall back down.
Like they used to do with Pharaoh.
Exactly. And the reason or the significance of this is to let them think that they have killed whatever is in the skies that is ruling under their domain.
Right.
However, again, that's a psychological thing. Imagine this. One, you can't fight. Two, you're going to be basically savaged by 1 million people.
Yeah.
And a common description that we have of them is that they were cannibals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we know about like ears, size, whatever, and so on and so forth.
Very, very. Also, some say hairy. Right?
Yeah,
There's different
big belts.
Exactly.
Have you heard that in a theory right now? Just want to throw it out there, but have you heard that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are out now? I heard this recently.
There's been different theories actually throughout the last 1400 years. Some said, for example, the Great Wall of China was this wall, and it was the Chinese and us.
The Mongols and whatever, yeah.
A lot of the ulama have debunked that as a myth, because it doesn't actually it doesn't line up properly, right? However, remember this: Allah doesn't make any false promises.
Of course not.
The real question you need to ask here is: are you ready? Okay, are you ready to face those tiny terrors? Right? That's seriously. Right? You might be able to take 1 or 2. You're not going to be able to take 1 million.
No, there's no way.
Right? Well, Allah warned you. He said, before that time, this will come. Make sure you're prepared. You're prepared ahead of time.
Yeah.
And that's again, it's the message or the moral that we want to get out to today is that we're trying to. These signs are great to talk about. They're good to learn about. But what are you doing in preparation of these?
The other scary thing is, Hafiz, is that Imam Mahdi, Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, Isa ibn Maryam. And as soon as Dajjal is killed, right after Alan will come and Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam will say, or someone will tell Sayyidina Isa that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are out. So you have one fitna, you think everything is all peaches and cream, and then bang, another one comes out, and it's Ya'juj and Ma'juj. The concept of what Hafiz is saying is, like, it doesn't stop. It just, one after the other. Okay, you might be great enough to pass Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, which I don't think a lot of people will be anyways, and then you get Ya'juj and Ma'juj right after that. We
forgot one thing though. The Dajjal will also have an army.
Yeah.
And it'll be certain people that like to wear black and rock back and forth like this in front of a wall. Right?
Yeah.
The Masonic temple folks.
Yeah.
Right? So think of it now. You're going to war basically.
Ah, absolutely.
You're not. First of all, no nuclear weapons, no AK-47, no bazookas. None of that stuff is gonna work.
Absolutely.
Right?
It'll be like that.
Hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
But even then, are you ready to get to that point? Are you going to be counted as a believer? What if, for example, and I'm just using this as a very extreme example, what if you approach Sayyidina Isa, Imam Mahdi, and they say you're not a believer? You're a munafiq.
Allahu Akbar.
Then what? There's a reason why we wish we were not alive in those times.
Absolutely.
Because to be alive in those times means that you have to be 100% on point, and not just in your amal, but also in your belief, right, 100%. Inside and out.
Absolutely.
So that's why that number is also so small.
Yeah, and that's the scary part where people don't realize, and the viewers need to understand this, especially if you haven't researched about that. Like, your iman has to be perfect, and we're not, like, to the bar. This is the bar that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, praying 5 times a day, fasting in the month of Ramadan, giving zakat, going for hajj. This is the bar.
That's the minimum bar.
Yeah, you're not even getting to that. You think you want to fight Dajjal, and you're going to be in that army. It's not happening. Like,
and it's easy to call yourself a Muslim.
Yeah.
But can you tell me with 100% guarantee that you're a mu'min? Right? A lot of people actually forget this fact, is that every Muslim is not a mu'min. But every mu'min is a Muslim. Right?
Yeah.
You're not ready to say, if you can't come to me and say, hey, I am a mu'min, there's work to be done.
Right.
There's still work left to be done. Right?
And we talked about, I think you mentioned it, where the people didn't know, because you used the Arabic terminologies, the beast that will arise from the earth, and he will have the staff of Sayyiduna Musa, and then he will have the ring of Sayyiduna Sulaiman. What is he going to do with the staff and the ring? I know he's going to mark people, but what is the significance of marking and stuff? Just so everybody knows, so we can obviously educate them in that aspect.
Well, you know your reality.
Yeah.
Who is real, who is truly a believer, and who's not. Right? And imagine this, a beast.
How about, okay, sorry, I want you to continue, but one thing just came to my mind because I want you to touch on it because you mentioned it. How about those people who only God could judge me?
अब आ गया तेरे खुदा. No, seriously, that's what it is. Like, look, just think of it.
Don't do it.
I was gonna say this when we brought up Dajjal. I said your Western Muslim's gonna say, hey, you can't judge him. He just has a scar on his forehead. That's it. He's blind in one eye. Allah can judge him. That's it.
Right? So it's not too bad. You know what? We're not gonna die if we join him, but Allah knows what's in my heart. So we'll go with that. You know how absurd that sounds? I'm sorry, man. Like you're basically a seller. You want the best of both, and you don't want to get it. Listen, the deen and your faith was meant for you to struggle just a little bit. We live such pampered lives. We don't like to struggle. Right. Anytime there's a little bit of inconvenience, we like to complain. We like to bicker.
Right.
This is what your Islam is trying to tell you. That listen, there's going to be struggles. You're going to be tested. Right.
Yeah.
We gave you all the tools. We armed you with all the approaches, how to do it, how to avoid trapping yourself in those situations. It's did you listen to it? Did you follow it? Did you learn it? That is the simplest thing. Going back to what I was saying, and I was going to touch with exactly what you just talked about. Imagine there's a beast standing in front of you. You ain't going to be conversing. You're not going to be saying, you're going to be probably reciting Ayatul Kursi or whatever. Or like,
if you know it.
But most people, oh shoot, oh this, that, they're going to be yelling and they're going to be running in the opposite direction.
Right.
So realistically, these trials and tribulations, they're supposed to bring fear in you.
Right.
But in a good way, so that you don't end up, Allah doesn't want you to go to hell.
Right.
Allah didn't predestine you for hell.
No.
Allah predestined you for Jannah. You
100%.
took yourself to the other side.
Very well said. There's a couple signs, and I want to start with Hafiz Abu and get into the meats and potatoes. Is the smoke will arise, which will fog the entire world, and then the sun will rise from the opposite side. And at that time is that the doors of forgiveness will be forever closed. That's how real it gets, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not send this azab, meaning the sun rising from the opposite side, until there is not going to be a believer left in this world, which means that everybody from the believers will be finished. But when we're a majority and all of this stuff is happening back to back to back to back, like you said, there's going to be Muslims, but there's not going to be mu'mins, to the point where, I don't know what, I don't know if I'm a muqallid, I don't know if I follow taqleed, and I'm, madhab, why do I have to follow an imam? I'm just a Muslim. Those are the ones that the azab is going to come for. So when the beast standing in front of you marks you with the staff of Sayyidina Musa, he's going to be declaring, you're a Jannati, you're a Jahannami. Pretty much, in nutshell, that's what it's going to signify. Who's saved will be from the ones who have the marking of Sayyidina Sulaiman. So concept is, this is what's going to happen, and that you will be judged before you're actually judged in front of the Creator Almighty. Now, so these are like some of the major signs that, people are adhering to. Hafiz Bilal, the scary part I wanted to leave the viewers with, I wouldn't say, it is scary, but the realest part is people often ask the Prophet ﷺ, when is the end of times? What's going to happen? So we know about the minor and major signs. But what did he ﷺ say about the lifespan of the ummah that we want to share with people so they have a better understanding of that?
I'll start off with what you're mentioning first. You're saying, this will happen, and then you have, for example, you have Sayyidina Isa, Imam Mahdi, Dajjal, Ya'juj, Ma'juj, and you have Dabbatul Ard, and you have the smoke, and you have all this natural phenomenon. Janabi, it wouldn't be called the day of reckoning if it wasn't such a case.
Right.
If you're thinking the end of times or Qiyamah is just going to be, Sayyidina Isa fights Sayyidina Isa and Sayyidina Imam Mahdi will fight Dajjal, and they will fight the Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and that's it. No. There's more to happen on that day than just that.
Right.
And that's the reason why it's called the day of reckoning.
Right.
That's why the Quran uses many different adjectives to refer to that day. Right? The day of judgment, the day of reckoning, and so on and so forth. And to your second question, could you just remind me? Sorry, slipped my mind.
So the average lifespan. Because people always want to know when is the end of time. Tell me the date, because that's what everybody wants to know.
Some scholars, right, and Allahu A'lam, they calculated using specific methods when the day of judgment approximately would arrive, because the exact date is only known to
Bishop.
Allah wa Rasul,
Yeah.
right? And they used a sort of concept. They looked at the previous nations,
Right.
right? They looked at how long was the Ummah of Sayyidina Musa alive for?
2,000 years.
2,000 years. And
Right.
then they looked at the following. How long was the Ummah of Sayyidina Isa alive for?
600 years.
Right.
Yeah.
In the time where you could still consider them Ahlul Kitab, right? Before we had the revelation of the Quran.
G.
So you had 2,000 and then you had 600,
Bishop.
right? I believe it was Imam Hajar al-Asqalani that used this method specifically.
Yeah.
And he said, and he deduced that if you take away the 600 from the 2,000, if you take away the period of the Christians from the period of the Jews, you would have the period remaining for the Muslims.
Right.
And I believe that number amounts to
1,400.
1,400 years.
Right.
You also have scholars following that use different methods. I believe Imam Jalaluddin Suyuti said a number similar to that,
Yeah.
1,400, 1,500,
Yeah.
right? As of recently, in the very recent past, a century ago, Sayyidi Ala Hazrat said approximately 200 years or something like that.
Right.
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but just
Yeah.
approximately 200 years from when he left or when he was still on the dunya.
Right.
And that just gives you a sort of picture or paints a picture is that we're in the year 1445.
Yeah.
Right? That's very close to those predictions.
If it's 1,500, then simple math tells you we're 55 years away from all of this happening. And to your point, where people don't understand is taking away the lifespan or how long the ummah of Sayyidina Musa, the entire Bani Israel at that time of Sayyidina Musa, was 2,000 years. And the ones who followed Injil of Sayyidina Isa, 600 years. You take away those, you get 1,400. That's supposed to be the lifespan of the Muslim ummah.
There's also one ultimate wisdom, and it's a good thing that we don't know the exact date of Qiyamah.
Right.
The reason for this is because we're all procrastinators.
Right.
We would wait for the last year, last month, some of us the last day, some of us last minute,
Right.
and then start acting religious, or that's what they call it nowadays, or start acting better, or actually believing or trying to believe.
Start being
Right.
a Muslim.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's the beauty in this is that Allah knew the nature of insan.
Right.
And that's why it was hidden from us. Because if He told us, what about all the generations that came before? Let's just say, for argument's sake, the Day of Judgment is supposed to be in 1500 Hijri. All and all the generations before us knew that. What would they have done? They wouldn't have practiced.
Of course not.
They're like, this is their problem. This is, I'll wait till the end of my life,
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We don't know. And there's a good thing we don't know. So that way we're constantly always ready and prepared. Simple example, you work in retail, so you know this. You could walk up to any of your stores, or you could walk up to any of your employees, and you could say, you could have an inspection.
Right.
They could be ready at any given moment.
Absolutely.
But if you tell them, hey, Wednesday, I'm coming,
They're
they're
gonna be
going
prepared
extra
for that.
prepared.
Yeah, for sure.
It doesn't count because
Absolutely.
you want to see it as if, for example, a customer would see it, right? It's
Right.
the same way. So it's the same thing. Allah doesn't want to just give you that, to just tell you, hey, it's going to be on this day, so be ready then.
Right.
That's not the point. That's not the trial and the tribulation that you're supposed to go through. That's just that. Then there's no point of having this life,
Right.
anyways.
Right.
So there's a hikmah ultimately in why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to hide that.
Absolutely. I mean, the scary part is that from sound narrations. I know there's a narration from Sayyiduna Salman al-Farsi, radiallahu anhu, which said that people will follow into the lifespan of my nation. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying would be 1,000 years after my demise, after I leave, meaning after the Khulafa Rashidun is done, and they will be 1,000 plus years. And then Imam Suyuti took a knuckle of that and said that there was another Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu said added 500 years. There was another narration in regards to that. All in all, to Hafiz Yahya's point, and if these points that we're talking about, 1445, and if they're right, and which ulama of haq is ulama of Ahl Sunnah, close to that time, 1500 years plus, that means our children are going to see the days of reckoning. And that's the scary part where people need to realize is that these are righteous ulama of the Ahl Sunnah who studied this stuff, took from sound narrations, and are giving it to us, and now we're presenting it to you, that it's very, very close. What is your message? I'll start with Hafiz Bilal, to everybody on the end of times. Like, what do we have to do? What is your message to them?
We've been speaking throughout the podcast, on the different signs. Hafiz also inputted, you shouldn't worry about the signs. It should be whatever you prep for it.
Yeah.
I would say that, talk about the signs. It's good. Learn about them, right? Because there's a wisdom behind it. It instills the fear of that this dunya is temporary.
Of course.
It gives you that notion and brings you back onto the right track,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And that's the whole idea behind it. For those that have passed away before Qiyamah, to have known about Qiyamah was to keep them on Iman,
Of course.
right? And what I would say to those that are concerned or about the end of times, or they're worried, hey, it could just be right, it could be even tomorrow if Allah willed, right? Forget about what's going to happen. Forget about what you've heard about what's going to happen. Forget all the signs. Ask yourself three questions and be prepared to answer for them. ما ربك ما دينك ما كنت تقول في حق هذا الرجل, and be ready to answer for what you've done.
Allahu Akbar.
Right?
Sorry, are you done?
No, I was just gonna say,
Yeah. Sorry.
focus on those three questions.
It was a very nice pause you did.
Sorry.
And it was like,
I just saw you drinking water and I thought you were going to speak, so I just stopped for
I
a
thought it was
second.
a mic drop situation. Sorry, go ahead.
So I said, focus on those three questions
Yeah.
before the questions you have kills all your time.
Allahu Akbar. Hafiz
I'm
Yahya.
going to add on to that. Say you know the answers. Okay, now for a quick second, go into your imagination. It's dark. You hear thumps, footsteps. You see two beings in front of you. And they're asking you questions. You know the answer. You knew the answer in this dunya before you left. But your mouth isn't opening.
Allahu Akbar.
So now imagine, even if you do know the answers, why isn't it not coming out? Right?
Allahu Akbar.
They ask you, who is your Lord? You know it, Rabbi Allah. But why is it not coming out? Think of it. That is also a scenario that a lot of people don't think or don't know about. That your mouth could even not open just because you might have said it on your tongue, but it wasn't in your heart. You didn't act on that. Right? Imagine Sayyidina Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam is in front of you. You cannot. You read the kalima la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but you cannot say this. You cannot say who he is.
You couldn't identify him.
Exactly. Right? Because in some narrations, they're not even going to be the other two questions. It's going to be straight to this question.
Allahu Akbar.
Right? So if your mouth doesn't open, so don't just study, implement the religion within yourselves and your life. That's what these signs of the Day of Judgment are for. They're to say, hey, listen, before you get to this, make sure you already have instilled within you the core, the fundamental of the religion.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, if you do end up coming to this, you're going to fail.
Allahu Akbar.
And it's going to cost you, not just in this life, it's going to cost you in the hereafter.
That's the thing, and I think two beautiful messages to end off. And I think the reality is that this is the realest it's going to get. It's the questions of the grave. It's preparing yourselves, mind, body, soul, spiritually connected with Allah and His Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. And I think that's what it is. So beautifully said from Hafiz Yahya and Hafiz Bilal. I think is a great podcast. I think there's probably going to be a number 2. Because every time I have the two Hufaz, they always ask for a sequel. So we'll see what the viewers say. So Jazakallah once again to the Hufaz for coming out, speaking about the end of times. And I'm sure it's going to be beneficial for all of you, and it was. But the message that I have, very short, is don't dwell on stuff that you can't change yet, but you can change yourself. And I said implement the change in yourself first, get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala your way, which is following the Quran and the Sunnah. I go work on that, be a better you before you try to fight in the army of Dajjal and Imam Mahdi and worrying about those things, because those things are not going to be asked you. Did you fight with Imam Mahdi and Dajjal? What's going to be asked of you is the 3 questions, like the Hufaz said. So Allah make it easy for all of us and the understanding of the deen. We appreciate everybody for watching. Share it, like it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, continue to push it out, give us feedback, put in the comments, what you want us to talk about, so on and so forth. We have Ramadan coming very closely, and then after Ramadan, we got something special planned for everybody with special guests and so on and so forth, which I think is going to be great. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.